Welcome to what is, I think, a very interesting input on learning in the 21st century because it gives us an opportunity to think about the many wonderful things that could happen. Before we start this, I have to give very particular thanks to my colleague Anthony Davies, who is the manager of our tutorial network, MyIT. His contributions, the information he's provided me with, the direction that he's given me on this has been really excellent. I have not included all of his wisdom, so anything that I've left out that's important, I apologize in advance, and anything that I say that's not quite right is of course my problem and not his. So in this next input, we're trying to look at ideas for what the education systems and learning will be like in the 21st century. So we're going to start by looking at the changes that will occur. We're also going to look at perhaps the emphasis on very young learners. We're going to look at what is regarded as the core learning skills that will be required in the 21st century. We'll also look at what technology is available. We're going to also look at a very important thing, which is our work-life balance, because we can't really think about education as being separate from the human, if you like. We also want to look at what teaching will be like into the future. And then, of course, we want to look a little bit at how analytics are going to help us in our teaching. I hope you enjoy it because certainly I have enjoyed the preparation. Okay, it is a shock how much knowledge there is in the world. According to Eric Schmidt, ex-CEO of Google, every 2 days now we add to our knowledge roughly what we had learned from the dawn of civilization all the way up to 2003. So there's a massive amount of additional information that we get on a daily basis. Why should that bother us? It bothers us on one particular level. And that particular level is we know that knowledge is power. And our feeling is that unless we remain connected to that knowledge, we are going to somehow or other lose. And that's the concern that a lot of us have. With the amount of knowledge there is out there in the world, how do we retain access to that? How do we retain some sort of competence in relation to that as teachers and as learners? We know that the amount of knowledge that we've got is only going to go up more and more and more. We also know that our capacity to retain it technologically also goes up. We know, according to Moore's law, that the capacity of computers doubles more or less every 18 months, a little bit closer to 2 years now. But the capacity that we have in a technological sense to retain information and knowledge and skills is huge, and it's getting huger. And what we want to do is, when we're thinking about education and learning in the 21st century, how do we deal with that? So shock number one really is about the volume of information or knowledge that we have to somehow process, interact with, feel competent in relation to. Shock number two is that the jobs that we have thought about may not exist in the future. In fact, now the most in-demand jobs did not exist even 5 to 10 years ago. 65% of primary school students, when they go to work, there's a high likelihood they will be working in jobs that do not exist yet. So what to do? How do we as teachers, how do we as people prepare ourselves or our students for jobs in the future that we don't yet know anything about? Before we get too focused on being overwhelmed by the amount of change there is and the increase in demand, let's look at some of the things that will remain constant and important going forward. Probably number one is that increasingly in the future, there will be the stresses and strains associated with new jobs and new positions and a lot of learning. The way that becomes not a problem is if the person or the child has good family relationships. That has always been important and always will be important. So when there is stresses in relation to work and study, someone who lives in a warm and understanding relationship will survive and will do better. As we also know, if you have got a high IQ, you're what we would describe as an intelligent person, you are going to be okay. IQ will not suddenly become irrelevant because there is a lot of AI out there, there is a lot of information, there's a lot of data. IQ will still remain important, as will good memory. You will find some people who will say that in the future memory will be less important because you can access things, but this is not true. You do need to have a good solid memory because that means when you're thinking with accurate data. Yeah, so those fundamentals will remain strong. And of course, reading, writing, and math remain essentials. Of course, there are new skills required for learning in the 21st century, but children must develop their skills in respect of reading because then that gives them a capacity to process information. They must develop their skills in relation to writing so that they can express what they have thought about. And of course, the underlying strength and knowledge that goes with math will remain important. And this is irrespective of what changes happen going forward. So we know that there are constants. The thing that is not constant is the amount of information that the next and the current generation will have to deal with. So we know those three R's will remain constant. We also know that they will not be the same in terms of how we deal with them as teachers and as learners. You know yourself already that when it comes to things like reading that you're doing, you can of course get an instantaneous translation. You can get summary of what it is that you've read. You could get an opinion piece on what you've read. You could get text to voice of what you've read. You can get analysis of what you've read, all immediately available on the internet. You can, of course, in that go further and look at developing reading skills that can be associated with good reading programs. Everything from perhaps doing speed reading assisted courses online to many other things that will develop reading skills. You will also know already that in the simple books that are available for children that they can put their finger or their pen on words and get pronunciation or images. So reading, while it will remain a constant in terms of something that we need to do, how we learn it will absolutely change. Similarly with writing, And of course, we all know that in writing skills can be very, very challenging, but I suspect that going into the future, people will make much more use of the likes of Grammarly.com, where you input a text and then you get improvements in it. And of course, I imagine there will also be a lot more template-based writing or model-based writing going forward. And then, of course, there will also be simultaneous translation, checking, rechecking that you will be able to get on your phone or on your laptop. So those are very much areas that will remain constant and will improve in terms of how we interact with them. Similarly, math will be something that will increasingly benefit from artificial intelligence or AI. You will get assistance in terms of your math learning, so that if you're doing something on, for example, the Khan Academy, you get it wrong, well, then the AI program will keep you engaged with that till you start getting it right, and then it will raise your challenge level according to what you know already. So those will remain constant, but they will also be very much affected by the available technology for improving our skills in those areas. There will be increased attention to the sort of development that we get for very, very young learners. We know that there's a huge amount of brain growth and brain activity between 0 and 3 and 3 and 5, though mainly between 0 and 3, and we will give increasing attention to that because we know that relationships are very, very important in that age, but also brain activity at that age is very predictive, if you like, of what a person can or will do in the future on a cognitive level. So there will be much more attention to how we teach, how we engage with very young learners. The other areas that we will probably start to experience is what we have noticed already, which is that people who play video games actually experience a change in their brain structure. So video games will change what your brain does physically. There is a fairly high likelihood that we will be using games like this into the future to change brain structure to make us more competent in particular areas. That is obviously a very, very positive part of the developments in technology and how they interface with learning. There is also, though it is a very questionable area and very, very difficult area, there is also the potential for pharmaceuticals to be used to improve brain growth and our capacity to think. But those are just a few little areas that we can look at now as being significant going into the future in terms of teaching and learning. So we know that there are going to be multiple changes in jobs that a person will have in the course of their lifetime. And we know that things will provide challenges. So for example, if you're moving many times in the course of your life into a new company, how does that affect you? How secure do you feel? How comforted do you feel in your work? Are you motivated by it? Within that, your relationships with other people, your own EQ will be very important. We've mentioned that already, but let's also consider that not only is your personal sense of being comfortable important in a physical workspace, but what does it also mean if you're working online? What does it mean if all your colleagues are in different countries? How do you deal with that on an emotional level? Where is the motivation or the connectedness that you would normally get with ease in a face-to-face group? So there will be challenges there going forward. There will be into the future a lot of competition, and I know that's a shock, but there will be a lot of competition because there is a good likelihood that you won't be competing with the guy or the girl down the road. You will be competing for your particular position internationally. There is a reasonable likelihood that a lot of jobs will go online. So people will in fact work at home rather than in a workspace, and they will be competing internationally. And of course, that will create a lot of pressure in terms of salaries for positions, and also simply by the number of people who are very capable of doing a particular job. Another thing that we have to look at as a very real concern going forward is lifelong learning. You will need to continually upskill. You will be continually in need of learning new things. Now, how do you do that? How do you develop the capacity to not feel disgruntled, disturbed, uncomfortable when you need to learn new things? That is, of course, something that we're going to be looking at, but is a very, very important part of what teaching and learning is going to be like going forward. So that's just an example of a few of the things that are challenging and our challenges for us as teachers to prepare our learners for, and of course as teachers to prepare ourselves for, because going into the future there's a very high likelihood that you will need to learn a lot more tech skill. That in fact there's a good likelihood you will be doing a good amount of your teaching online as well. So not only challenges for everyone in the world, but challenges for us as educationalists and learners. Yes, so I guess one of the things that we really want to take out of today's input is, what do we need to know? What advice can we give ourselves? Can we give our students about how they can learn, what they need to adjust to in terms of the future? Now, we've got some interesting things about what we do need to know, or who we need to be, if you like. And if we focus on just the academic measures, then we have a problem. If we in fact want our students just to work hard, strive hard, study hard, we may not be inviting them into a good future. We may in fact be inviting them into problems. One of the indicators, if you like, of academic success is something called delay of gratification. And this is, of course, from Hofstadter, who in his study across cultures have identified certain cultures as cultures in which the members are happy to say, okay, I won't have that pleasure, I won't have that joy today, I'll postpone it into the future. And that can be a long future. The interesting thing about the delay of gratification is that it follows very closely academic success, so that we can see that Korean culture, for example, is very strong on delay of gratification. So the members of that culture are quite happy to say, no, I will not have it now. I'm happy to have my joy in the future. And they work very hard and they are academically very successful. But the outcome is that within Korea, for example, the members of the country who work have got the second highest number of job hours in the world. That's a lot of job hours. They've got the 10th highest rate of suicide. They've got the 17th highest rate of alcoholism. Now that's out of a group of 191 countries. So we have to ask ourselves if as teachers and if as educationalists we say to our students, work hard, think about tomorrow, think about next month, think about 10 years, and don't have a balanced life now, we might be inviting them into a life of relative unhappiness. Now, I don't want to be negative about Korean people, because Korean people are as lovely as everyone else. But what I am saying is that in terms of delay of gratification or a very, very strong focus on study and not a focus on other beneficial things, we may in fact be creating problems. So going forward, looking into the future, we need to be aware of the challenges that our students will have, but we also need to be aware of what we perhaps want them to be like when they are old or when their families are grown. And what we have from a very famous study still going from Harvard lasted so far has lasted 75 years, and it's of students, undergraduates, and what their lives have been like, and when they get older, how they describe their life and how good, how happy they feel. The number one thing is those people who had good relationships, good family relationships, good work relationships were the people who were happy. We need to learn from that. That when we are telling our students about what they will need to do going into the 21st century, do bear in mind that study is only a part of it. So we know that the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, are not enough. The question is, what is enough for the 21st century? Clearly, there's a lot of things that we are going to need, but there are what is referred to as the 4 C's, or the 4 key competences for life and work in the 21st century. The first one that we want to look at is the whole idea that when we receive information, we need to ask questions about that information. We need to critique it. So what's the source? How accurate is that source? What questions can we ask about that material or that information in order to extend our knowledge and our awareness of it? So the whole idea that in learning and in education you should ask questions is a very old one. In a Western context, it goes all the way back to Socrates, who was always about asking questions in order to learn. So that's number one. Number two is creativity. So that when we're looking into the future, when we're working in the future, when there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, there will also be a lot of problems. How do you solve those? How do you come up with new ideas? How do you process the information that you've got in order to create something new? Now, this is something that is not encouraged by our current school system. Our school systems tend to be focused on learning the information, recalling it, and then re-delivering it. This will not be a core skill in the 21st century. It's much more about, one, analyzing source, critiquing information, and two, in relation to academic and work life and other such things, coming up with creative solutions. We also know that it's very unlikely that any one person going forward will have all the skills necessary to do anything. That collaboration will be a major part of a work environment. It already is, but it will be more important. That groups of people will be working on projects to achieve particular outcomes. So the capacity to collaborate is something that will be very important in terms of achieving outcomes. Schools will be moving towards this increasingly, and you can see this in some of the more sophisticated schools who encourage their students to do project-based work. So that's a major area to be addressed going forward, the idea that we need to collaborate to deal with projects and solve problems and create new solutions. The last idea that we want to look at now is communication. So academics and workers going into the future will need to be aware of their skills in terms of communication, not only the clarity of what they're communicating, but how they're communicating, what networks of people they're communicating with, and how they cooperate in that communication with them. So expectation for the 21st century is reducible to the 4 C's. So those 4 C's, which are critical thinking, being creative in your approach, being collaborative in your approach, and good, clear communication. It's probably time to have a look at some of the tech that is available now, some of which you will be familiar with, and some of which is suggestive of the learning systems that can be used going forward. So we've got a few that I think are very interesting, everything from Oculus Quest, which you can see a small video of, through to a system of holoporting in which the teacher can appear in the physical environment as if they are actually there to engage with the learners in the teaching, and also a really elegant breakdown of learning visuals and systems that can be used for training medical students. So rather than my talking about this, you can have a look at what I think are 3 fairly good presentations on this in the next few slides.
Virtual reality is an amazing technology when it comes to learning and education, and the Oculus Quest is no exception. With the world in the state that it's at right now, and everyone kind of having to be at home, including kids, I wanted to show you some of the best educational experiences that you can use on the Oculus Quest to both pass the time and continue working out your brain and learning while you're doing it. So let's jump in and check out educational experiences on the Oculus Quest. Number 1, Titans of Space Plus. There are quite a few space-based experiences I'm going to mention today, but one of the best and most educational is Titans of Space Plus. In this experience, you head out on a guided tour of our solar system with your friendly and knowledgeable tour guide. There's actually 2 hours of content that can be learned as you stop at each of the planets, the major moons, dwarf planets, and even zoom farther into the universe to take a look at huge stars. This experience makes you really feel the vast scale of the universe, and it presents learning in a fun but very educational way. This is one of the best educational apps on the Quest Store, so I definitely recommend it. Titans of Space Plus is $9.99. Number 2, Star Chart. Our second space-based experience is Star Chart. Unlike the first experience, this is more like a VR planetarium. You can still explore planets, but this experience gives you the ability to search the night sky and find constellations, explore a vast 3D solar system, and even see moments in time like stepping onto the moon and the ISS cupola. It's still a great experience though if you're looking to expand on Titans of Space. Star Chart is $9.99. Number 3, Multiverse. Multiverse is an online social and learning platform that is free. Right now, the only section open to explore and learn from is the planetarium. The description from this experience describes it best. Multiverse is an experience like no other. Learn about astronomy while navigating through awe-inspiring environments that showcase the solar system, its planets, their moons, and other solar bodies. Enter the planetarium to discover mind-blowing images, videos, and models, all rendered in stunning detail with audio descriptions, toys, and interactive exhibits. I've never personally used this one before, but I have heard good things about it, and since it's free, you can always give it a shot. Number 4, Apollo 11. These last two space experiences are very different from the others. You'll get the chance to experience the historic events of Apollo 11 from the perspective of those involved with the mission. It's a pretty surreal experience that really allows you to see the events from a new perspective, and it works great to teach about history and space travel. Apollo 11 is $9.99. Number 5, Mission ISS. The next experience is one of the most amazing free experiences on the Quest, and that is Mission ISS. In Mission ISS, you get to visit the International Space Station, float around in zero gravity, go out into space on a spacewalk, and even help perform certain tasks on the ISS. This experience is as close to being up in space as you can get in VR, and it's a great educational tool to show how those on the ISS live and go about their daily lives. The only thing to keep in mind with this experience is that due to the zero gravity nature of the game, it can cause some motion sickness in some people, so just keep that in mind. But for free, Mission ISS is just stellar. Number 6, National Geographic Explore VR. Well, we've talked about space, now let's talk about our planet with some history and geography experiences. National Geographic Explore VR is still one of my favorite experiences on the Quest to show people the power of travel and learning. Right now, there are 2 places you can go. In Antarctica, you will kayak through the icy waters as whales swim underneath on the search for penguins. Take pictures and climb an ice wall in the stunning experience. Then when you're done, head to Machu Picchu to explore the ancient ruins as you take photos and step back in time to see what it was like to live many years ago. My 10-year-old son loves this game, and I can feel good knowing that he can learn while also enjoying seeing the world. National Geographic Explore VR is $9.99. Number 7, Ocean Rift. Now it's time to head under the ocean and explore. In Ocean Rift, you can freely swim around 14 different habitats full of living creatures. You can see dolphins, sharks, whales, and so much more. For those who love animals or learning about them, this is an amazing opportunity to swim with creatures you would otherwise never see or want to see in person. Plus, if you activate Education Mode, there are over 40 narrated education points you can find teaching about the creatures and their habitats. Ocean Rift is $9.99. Number 8, Wander. Now that you've explored some 3D renders of the world, let's explore the real world. In Wander, you can travel all over the world and see the sights, visit locations you've only ever dreamed of, or step back in time and check out some locations from your past. This application uses Google Street View and photos to create an experience that allows you to jump from location to location and see them in full 360 degrees. It works great as a travel experience to see the world, or if you're learning about a specific place, you can jump there so you can better visualize what it looks like. There is even Wikipedia integration for additional learning. Wander is $9.99. Number 9, Anne Frank House VR. History has always been one of my personal favorite things to learn about, and this next game shows the beauty of VR in learning about history. In Anne Frank House VR, you get to explore the childhood home of Anne Frank during the World War II period. Enter the secret annex and see where Anne and her family hid to escape from the Nazis. This experience is amazing with a narrated tour of the house, as well as the ability to just explore and look around. It helps to really bring history to life in a totally new way. Anne Frank House is free. Number 10, Beat Saber. Why is Beat Saber on this list, you ask? One thing all people, including kids, need is physical activity, and being stuck inside can put a damper on that. One way to fix that is to use some of the awesome experiences on the Quest to encourage getting up and moving. The first of those games is Beat Saber. Slash the cubes to the beat as you swing and dance to the musical tracks while also feeling like a Jedi. Beat Saber is probably the most well-known music rhythm game in the world at this point, and if you're looking for physical activity, you can't go wrong with it. Beat Saber is $29.99. Number 11, Box VR. If you're looking for a more structured exercise, then Box VR is for you. Box VR is designed from the ground up to be a cardio and exercise experience where you can pick from a list of workouts at different lengths. This game is great for getting your heart rate up and encouraging movement and exercise. Box VR is $29.99. Number 12, Synth Riders. Last on our list of games to get you up and moving is Synth Riders. This game is a little more calm than the other two, but don't let it fool you. It's still an incredible workout. Dance to the music as you move your hands to hit the proper targets. This game is a lot of fun and will get you up and moving around while having a grand time listening to great music. Synth Riders is $19.99. Number 13, Gadgeteer. Now that we've worked out our bodies, let's work out our minds. Gadgeteer is an amazing game that gets your mind working hard to solve puzzles using physics. This game encourages not just learning about how physics work, but also problem solving, and it's just a great way to flex your brain muscles. Then, if you really want to get your mind working, start creating your own puzzles. That'll really get you thinking about physics and mechanics. Gadgeteer is $14.99. Number 14, Tilt Brush. Now let's talk art class. Tilt Brush is an amazing artistic tool that lets you paint and create 3D art in VR. This experience is stunning, to be honest, and the only limit is the creativity of the person using it. If you're looking for a way to unleash creative energy, then this is one of the best ways to do it, with many different brush types and features, plus the ability to walk through the art you've created is a totally new experience. Tilt Brush is $19.99. Number 15, Sculpture VR. If you're looking to go a different direction for art, then check out Sculpture VR. This experience allows you to sculpt and create until your heart's content, and with its amazing zoom and scale features, you can even do tiny details and then hang glide over your creations. Sculpture VR is $9.99. Number 16, other various VR videos. On top of all of the applications and games mentioned above, there are a ton of educational 360-degree videos and 180-degree VR videos available on various platforms, like Within, a curated application on the Quest that gives you some of the best VR videos from education to entertainment, or Adam Savage's Tested experience that puts you in the workshop with creators to see how they go about their craft. Even YouTube has a huge section of videos you can watch in VR and travel the world, visit museums, or learn about just about anything possible. You can even take a trip to Disney World for recess if you want. All of those experiences are free, and there is a massive amount of good quality educational content to be had in VR. As I mentioned before, virtual reality is an amazing tool when it comes to education and learning. And in my personal opinion, I believe in the future we're going to see even more utilization of that technology.
Hi, today we're going to show you an exciting new technology that could fundamentally change the way that people will communicate in the future. Imagine being able to virtually teleport from one space to another in real time. Hey Sergio,
Yes, Ram.
how does it feel like to be holoported?
It feels great to be holoported.
So if Sergio is to wear his HoloLens device, and I'm going to wear mine, we can see each other in full 3D in real time. We can interact and communicate as if we're co-present. Sergio, can you walk around my space? Can you walk behind this chair? So we're doing everything to give the impression that Sergio and I are present in the same space. Sergio, let's just do a high five. That's
Bye
great.
bye.
Thank you, Sergio. We call this technology holoportation. Now, to make all this happen, we've had to create a new type of 3D capture technology. I'm surrounded by these 3D cameras that we've developed in our team. Each of them is capturing me from a separate viewpoint, and we're fusing this data together to create a temporally consistent model, as you can see reconstructed live behind me. Now, the camera that's filming me has a HoloLens tracking system attached, and this allows us to take these 3D models and composite them in real time into the real world, as you can see here. And that gives you a sense of the fidelity of the reconstructions that we can achieve. Once we have these reconstructions, we can texture them. We can then compress the data and transmit the data over to the other side. Over on the other side, a user wearing a HoloLens can see these remote participants live in their space as if they're co-present. And that's what we're showing you picture in picture. Now imagine using this type of capture technology to connect with family members who are thousands of miles away. And that's exactly what we're going to demonstrate to you right now. My daughter is stood in a similar capture rig somewhere else in our lab. And she's going to holoport into my space, and I'm going to interact with her wearing my HoloLens.
Hi, Bob, I miss you.
Hey Lilia, I miss you too.
When you coming home?
I'm coming home very soon. Let me get out of your way. Hey Lilia, you can only hear me, you can't see me, but what are these toys?
I have toys to show you. This one is name is Elmo.
Elmo?
And he can sing.
He can sing, wow. And what about the other one?
The other one is called Tina, and I like it because it has different stuff.
Well, that's so cool. So Lilia, can you climb up on this chair that's behind you?
Climb?
Yeah, climb up. Be very careful. Now I'm going to count to 3 and I want you to jump. 1, 2, 3, jump! That was so cool. Oh, let me get out of your way again.
I like you so much.
I love you too.
Come home soon.
I'll be home very soon. Bye bye. Now in that example, we were demonstrating live 3D capture, but our system is capable of another thing. We can actually record and play back that entire session. Now this is almost like reversing through time. And if I wear my HoloLens device, it's almost like walking into a living memory that I can see through another pair of eyes from all these different perspectives. And because this is 3D content, we can miniaturize it onto this coffee table and experience it in a more convenient manner. And this becomes a magical way of experiencing these live captured memories. Now imagine being able to teleport to any place with anyone at any time. And that's what holoportation is all about. Thank you for watching.
We use a combination of cadavers and medical illustrations to teach students anatomy. This is a curriculum that hasn't drastically changed in over 100 years because there simply hasn't been another way. The mixed reality of the HoloLens has the potential to revolutionize this education by bringing 3D content into the real world. Now, one of the biggest challenges for students learning anatomy is understanding the body in 3 dimensions and how all the different systems fit together. Using holograms, we can easily separate and focus in on individual systems. For example, we can focus in on the femur, and students can immediately see some of the types of fractures they may one day encounter in the clinic. Now, I can leverage all of these new capabilities while maintaining the important connection with my students. When we're both wearing a HoloLens, I can see what they're looking at, what they're interacting with. I can assess their progress, and they can communicate with me and each other naturally. For example, I can see if Michelle has a question in class, or whether Gwen has a question while learning remotely. Now, obviously, a cadaver doesn't move. This makes it difficult to see the way a living body actually works. HoloLens doesn't have this limitation. Systems can be animated to easily see how things function. Let's take a look at the center of the cardiovascular system, the heart. It's an amazing organ. In reality, it's about the size of your fist. With HoloLens, we can easily scale up the heart to let students see minute details. We can even see inside the heart to see the valves in action. This is a new way of seeing things, and it has the potential to help students understand the structure and physiology of the body in a way that's just not possible today. Now, what you've just seen is a vision of how HoloLens could enhance one single subject. But as an educator, it's easy for me to see that it's not just anatomy that could benefit from this technology. This could change how everyone learns. Imagine for a moment some of the other fields that could be changed. For example, chemistry and genetics, art, engineering, and paleontology. And the best part is, we get to help define that future together. I can't wait to see what you future holographic developers are going to do with this amazing technology.
So gamification has been around for some time and has progressed considerably from its earlier days when it was all about, getting a tick or a cross, or reaching an outcome and going, yay, I've got a shield. Sophisticated gamification systems deal not so much with success states as fail states. So where a learner fails, then the system helps them identify why they failed and how they can move away from that failure going into the future. So very, very important part of learning, not least of which is because it's motivating. When people play games, they don't think it's work. They're they're enjoying the process, because that is, after all what game design is about. So gamification now is available across all sorts of areas in education and will remain a key part of learning into the future. Okay, the job of the future, or jobs of the future, we know that for a large number of them, you will need to train and retrain and train and retrain. So essentially, for jobs of the future, you're looking at lifelong learning. And if we've got good systems of that, then that shouldn't be a problem. I think it's fair to say that if we stay with our current systems of learning and we need to retrain all the time, it could be a very, very difficult thing. But jobs of the future, they're going to require more higher order thinking. We will need the 4 C's, of course. There's going to be a high level of interaction between us and all sorts of computing systems or computing devices. The latest estimate is that the average human will spend something like 30 years of their lives looking at screens. So it's very high in the probability that your job in the future is going to have a lot of interaction with screens. Do bear in mind that some jobs will not change very much. If you're a gardener, for example, not very much is going to change. If you're a plumber, that's not going to change very much either. If you're a nurse, you will still be very, very much engaged with personal contact with your patients. Similarly, if you are a doctor, and of course the life of the teacher will change, but we'll look at that a little bit more later. We want to ask, what does it look like for a teacher in the future? We know that the traditional role, which has been, or at least was, the idea that the teacher would be the sage on the stage, in other words, the person who knows all the stuff, and that the learners listen to and follow, we know that that role will go. The whole idea that the teacher will know enough, or the teacher can teach everything from one book, that will absolutely be gone. What will happen going into the future is that the teacher will be the guide on the side. So the teacher will help learners go towards suitable resources, will help learners with the development of their 4 C's, will help learners in terms of their motivation and attention to the tasks at hand. The teacher of the future is probably also actively engaged in analytics. So what is it that the student has learned? What are their areas of challenge? All of this, of course, will be identified by AI systems, so the teacher will know a lot more about each individual learner and will likely have personalized learning targets for each student. So in terms of what the future is going to look like for teachers, it's much more about the teacher being the guide, the teacher helping the learner in terms of their interaction with external sources, or in fact classroom sources, to help them learn and achieve the outcomes that are necessary for them academically and vocationally going into the 21st century. One of the things that fascinates me as a teacher and as a teacher trainer is trying to understand what it is the learners are understanding when you're teaching or when they're working, because you don't know. You can't see inside their heads. You don't really know what they're focused on. You don't really know how they're processing. Of course, you can ask intelligent questions, very, very important. You can ask concept check questions. You can do instruction checks so you know that they're on task. You can monitor as they're working with one another, all very important things to do, but you never really know what they're actually thinking about and what particular challenges they have. You can look them in the eye and watch while they're thinking if their pupils are dilating, and if they are, you know that they are thinking hard. If they aren't, well, then you know that they're not. But wouldn't it be wonderful if you gave your students a task and you had an AI system that was constantly monitoring as they were working what they're getting and what they're not getting? A system that was adjusting what they were focusing on in terms of learning to make it harder, make it easier, to develop clarification and so on. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you had a system that could analyze how eye movement is going, what they're actually targeting, and many other things? Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could have a look at the analysis of the results and say, aha, this is what my students need, or in fact just monitor the report that you get from your analytical system that says this is what your students need to work on next. And I think this is a really, really nice way of looking at teaching and learning in the 21st century. It's going to be a challenge, as teaching and learning always is, but with the assistance of good technology, with the assistance of good approaches to learning, especially the 4 C's, while not forgetting the importance of IQ and memory and reading, writing and math, and the real importance of close relationships. When we look at what technology can bring us in the 21st century, we can see it's a real plus.